Howdy y'all, Galator here. This is my first video, so I won't bore you all with a long introduction and just jump right into the ranking. So starting us off at number 10 on our list is Ashenvale. To be completely honest with anyone listening, I took this way too seriously when ranking these zones. I actually ranked them on a 2-score system. The first score was the technicality of the zone, or how good it actually was objectively. This took into account, how the quests were structured. Did they require you to run to one end of the zone and then back to turn it in, and then back to get more hide? And was that a bad thing? So that was half of the ranking system, and Ashenvale scored pretty low on this, because it's not that interesting. But on the other end is ambience. So ambience is half the score because Vanilla WoW wasn't great because it was a good game. It was great because it was a world you felt like you lived in. You immersed yourself in the story, the music, the artwork. And Ashenvale scores, relatively high, but not nearly as high as some of the zones coming up next. So at number 9 we have Durotar. Now, giving away my obvious bias, I was a hardcore Alliance player during Vanilla. I never even touched a Horde player until Burning Crusade. For that reason, probably the ambience score is less than average for Durotar, just because I don't have any personal attachment to the aesthetic of the zone. But, for technicality, Blizzard obviously put a lot more work into this Horde starting zone than they did any of the others. So, it lands at number 9 on our list. Coming in at number 8 is Darkshore, but for the exact opposite reason as Durotar. So Darkshore has a wonderful ambience, kind of this depressing, dark mood that just saturates the entire zone. Not in the same way as Duskwood, where it's more of a black or dark blue, but Darkshore has this kind of gray tone to it that makes the player feel as if there's actually something wrong in the zone that you're questing in. However, to offset this is the awful technical score I'm giving Darkshore. It's as if Blizzard took all the worst quest types that people hated during testing and put them into one zone. Whether that be grind 1,000 mobs for a rare loot item, to escort quests, to finding hidden little boxes in a shrub and feeding it crab legs. Darkshore just kind of sucks at that. But it makes up for it in the ambience by a long shot and lands in number 8 on our list. Coming in at 7 is Felwood. Now Felwood has this score for very similar reasons as Darkshore. However, where Darkshore erred on the side of subtle with its ambience, with nice, gray and light blue hues, Felwood smacks you in the face with dark greens and boiling cauldrons of green ooze and demonic creatures romping around. So you definitely get the sense with your character that this is a sick forest, that there's some deep evil inside of it. But it isn't as subtle as Darkshore, which is why I gave Darkshore slightly higher points for ambience. However, Felwood does have you questing through it in a relatively linear fashion, from bottom to top. Something you really look forward to in a vanilla WoW zone. I mean, most of them are all over the place, or even all over continents. So Felwood scores slightly higher in technicality, but just slightly lower in ambience, putting it at number 7 in our list. At number 6 we have Desolace, which is perhaps a zone many of you didn't expect to make it into the top 10 list, but hear me out. Desolace is one of the few zones I am giving a perfect ambience score to. The reason for this is Blizzard uses space and a minimalistic, eerie soundtrack to convey a sense of loneliness and emptiness to the player, which is echoed throughout the entire zone. Even the quests don't have that much substance to them. It's just grind mobs. There's not much of a story. I think really the only substantive story of the zone is these warring centaur clans that you only really get to know after slaughtering how many hundred of them? So overall, I am completely blown away with how Blizzard put the zone together. Except it's boring. And for that reason, it's at 6. Bulgor comes in number 5 on our list because it has a very unique art style to the game, which not only adds a certain level of ambience, which it's scores fairly high on, but also the story takes you through the zone. You get to know the Tauren people a little more intimately than perhaps the other starting zones introduce you to their races, bar perhaps the undead zone for the Horde. So, Bulgor's good, slightly above average, and that's why it's at number 5. I don't really have a better reason for that. So at number 4 we have Teldrassil, and I know I've included a lot of starting zones on this list, but that's because Blizzard put a lot of time into polishing and making those zones clean to give new players a good first impression of World of Warcraft. The ambient score for Teldrassil is very high, similar to Ashenvale. It leaves you with a sort of mysterious, ethereal feeling that's reminiscent of how one viewed the Night Elves in Warcraft 3, which I like. Technicality, however, the score is pretty low, as you found countless Night Elf corpses along the Wetlands Road trying to escape that god-awful leveling experience associated with Teldrassil and to seek refuge in a good zone like Dune Moreau. So yeah, number 6, I thoroughly like the zone, even for its faults. My first alt was actually a Night Elf Rogue. Yeah, no, not a Druid, a Rogue, and I loved the mix of Shadow Meld with Stealth, so highly would recommend rolling a Night Elf Rogue. So at number 3 is Tenaris, and the reason it scores so high, I'm going to have to go on a little bit of a tangent. So one of the things that made vanilla World of Warcraft so great were the quests. And I'm going to emphasize the word quest because they truly felt like epic quests or journeys that your character had to embark on, whether that be to go meet important characters of the lore, leaders in the world, and discuss your troubles, or go to a distant land and find rare relics and bring them back to the quest giver. And Tenaris was one of those zones. You spent a decent chunk of your time between the levels of 35 and 50 in this zone. It was a hub. You would get quests to go do dungeons, collect relics, kill things on the other continent, and then you'd come back and you'd return to the quest giver, tell them what you'd done, and then they'd send you somewhere else. It was interesting, and Tenaris was also not that polished of a zone. I imagine that Blizzard started developing it late, not that close or far away from launch, and it kind of had this mysterious feel to it. So just like Desolace, it had a great use of space to make you feel small in a bigger world, but also just little tidbits of stories that they never quite, flushed out. You had the Zul'Farrak tribe. You had these random ogres that had these camps south in the zone. You had pirates. It was overall just a very mysterious zone, completely ignoring the caverns of time sitting there that you just had no idea what was going on with. So yes, Tenaris scores high. It's number 3 on our list because it also gets a perfect ambience score, but also the technicality, I'm going to score really high because it really had that quest feel that made vanilla World of Warcraft a great game. You can't do a Kalimdor list without mentioning the Barrens. It's essentially the trademark zone of the entire continent. Now, whether you have fond memories of this because of Wailing Caverns, or Perrin's Trade Chat, or maybe you were just a Horde player, in that case you spent a lot of time leveling here, it is a trademark zone of the entire continent. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't play Horde in vanilla, so my memory of the Barrens is slightly different. I instead was a Dwarf Paladin, and at about level 14, I got the bright idea to go explore the outside world, not knowing that I would be instantly killed. So I made the deadly trek up through the wetlands, took a boat to Theramore, and then ran into the Barrens. And it was like being in a completely different world. Part of it is Blizzard did steal the African safari theme for this zone, but it really felt like you were on a completely different continent. You went from the Eastern Kingdoms, which had some of the familiar fantasy tropes of kingdoms and castles, to this wild new continent which your player could explore. So yeah, perfect ambient score for the Barrens. And then going back and leveling through it for this list, technicality score is fairly high actually. You had some nice quest hubs separated at different distances. It helps that it's, I think the largest zone in Kalimdor at the time. And you would run between them. You would, kill Quillbor, do the Wailing Caverns. You had Centaur. You were meeting the Tauren. In the north, you were fighting the Night Elves. In the south, you were fighting the dwarves and then a human compound. It was a really cool zone from the Horde perspective, so it's number 2 on our list. I'm going to quickly do 2 honorable mentions, the first one being dishonorable as the worst zone in Kalimdor, and that is Dustwallow Marsh. So I hate this zone. It has no coherent story, it has a Nixia's Lair, it has Theramore Isle, which is a huge lore point from Warcraft 3 that they did almost nothing with, and to give this eerie swamp a sense of danger, they just made the mobs bigger. You had big spiders, big crocolisks, big turtles. It was just a boring zone. I'll selfishly admit that I kind of hate this zone because at level 38, I essentially ran out of quests in my quest log to hit 40. Just poor planning and Arshlo just being young. And I really wanted my mountain plate armor, so I just ran up and down the shore slaughtering turtles for 2 levels. So, yep, worst zone in Kalimdor. Our second runner-up, or honorable mention, which is actually a good one, is Ungoro Crater. So we already had a dense jungle zone, that was Stranglethorn, but Ungoros felt distinctly different. It was sort of a prehistoric zone with these different plant life and dinosaurs running around, which we didn't see a whole lot of everywhere else. But I think what made it a great zone was it was juxtaposed against these very clear-cut, glowing crystals that spaced out among the dense jungle. And you had these pillars you had to activate. And this sort of juxtaposition between these Titan relics with a prehistoric jungle, it just let your imagination run wild. It was a really cool zone in World of Warcraft. I kind of gave up trying to tell you guys the technical score for a lot of these, so I won't bore you with the score for Ungoro. But perfect ambient score and a near perfect technical score. It was a fun zone to quest in. And at number 1, we have Winterspring. Now, I absolutely love Winterspring. It's one of my favorite zones in all of World of Warcraft. Now, the Eastern Kingdom zones all ranked slightly higher than the Kalimdor zones, but I felt that was maybe due to my alliance bias, which is why I'm not going to rank both continents in the same video. But okay, back to Winterspring. I love Winterspring for a similar reason that I love Ungoro Crater. It takes 2 opposing ideas and puts them together to create something new and exciting, a really unique aesthetic. And for Winterspring, as the name suggests, is winter and spring. So what you have is the sky is these nice hues of pinks and blues, the foliage is green but slightly snow-covered, and the whole zone is a snow-covered zone, one of only 2 in vanilla World of Warcraft, but it's not frigid and cold like Dune Moreau, which was meant to feel harsh. Winterspring is kind of a mix. It's a snow-covered zone, but you have hot springs in it. And it doesn't have that kind of cold, put-offish feeling that, most snow zones probably would have. And the leveling here is actually exciting. True to Vanilla WoW's feel, it's not fully flushed out. It has mystery involved in it, so you actually learn a little bit about the Moonkin and their ties to Elune, but not enough. There's just random ice giant caverns to the south. I really don't even know how to begin to describe this zone other than, out of all the zones I quested through in vanilla World of Warcraft, Winterspring is by far the best one in Kalimdor. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. This is my first video, so I do have another one coming out on the Eastern Kingdoms really soon, top 10. But if you do subscribe and like this video, and you'd be interested in more vanilla World of Warcraft videos from me, leave a comment. Tell me what sort of video you'd like to see. Whether that's another top 10 list, or maybe some lore videos, or a how-to for vanilla WoW. I'm up for all of it. Completely brand new to this, so you guys can kind of help me pick where this channel goes. Au revoir.